Ani, Lindsay, Lachance, Anishinaabe. My traditional name is Teteowachi, which means wind dancer. Miigwech to the organizers of this event, thank you so much for inviting us and having us here today. Miigwech also to our host nations for allowing us to gather together and to share and learn and spend an afternoon together really getting to know one another and creating our own collaborative experience.
Hi, my name's Jill. I also would like to raise my hands and acknowledge that we're on unceded Coast Salish territory, and I've been a guest here for a long time, and I thank everyone who allows that to still be. And I'm really excited about being here today. For me, it's an interesting learning process. I've met a tremendous amount of new people, including my co-facilitator today. But we're going to take a little bit of a different approach. We're going to try to get out of the way as facilitators and come back as questions and leave these extraordinary, talented people in front of you to speak. Before I do that, I just wanted to acknowledge that the learning that's actually gone on here today, and that I feel very thankful for both the presenters and all of the insights that everyone has brought.
Yeah, we wanted to acknowledge that this morning we were lucky enough to spend a lot of time talking about relationship building, talking about process, talking about respect and reciprocity. And these are definitely things that are at the core of the practices, again, that we're going to hear from this panel. And we also wanted to introduce reconciliation, because that's something that is a word that is going to be used today, and this is something that we wanted to make sure we bring to a focus as we hear from our presenters, our artists today. And something that Peter said about not silencing voices, I think this is something to consider about when we think of reconciliation, that it's not only right now, but it's for our ancestors, it's for our relations, it's for our future generations as well. So thinking about reconciliation when we hear about this and how the word is used and how powerful now especially it's become, is something that we would like for you guys to think about.
And the other stream, which is nice that we're sort of indigenous, non-indigenous co-presenters, is that the panel is about the colonial legacy. So I think we still have to remember the times we still sit in, and the work that still needs to be done as we engage in these conversations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce the panel, and I'm going to introduce the two projects, and then one project's going to introduce themselves, the details of their project, and we're just going to move from group to group, and then hopefully it'll leave us enough time before the next session to have some conversations and some discussions. So first I'll just introduce the panel. Here we have Sid, Bob, and his son Osk, joined by, and Penny Couchie, and we have Ruth Howard, Will Weigler, Krystal Cook. I can't see Sonaquila, but I know she's there. Sonaquila Weiss, and then Krystal, Sparrow, and Jill Weaving. And there's 3 different projects they're going to talk about. We're starting with the farthest away first. So our guests from Ontario and Nipissing will start, and then Will and Krystal, who will talk about their project on Vancouver Island, will pick up the torch, as it were, and then we'll end with the local, a project here in Stanley Park. So first, a quickie about Ruth Howard, which I have to confess I have met for only the second time. And now knowing what this woman does for the Canadian art scenes, it's actually a privilege to meet you, Ruth. The director of Toronto-based Jumblies Theatre, and she's been making art, making community art, making connections, and building relationships for a really long time, and many of us are very thankful for the work she's done. A lot of it is both large scale, but also outreach, and making sure there's an intimate sense of inclusion in her work. And that brought her into touch with Penny and Sid. There's better biographies, you know, in the programs, so I'm just giving you the highlights here. They've probably crafted those biographies. Penny Couchie and Sid Bob are the co-founders and artistic directors of Aanmitaagzi, close? Based in Nipissing First Nations in Ontario, and both extremely talented and deep and well-versed artists in their own right brought their work back to their community. and have been working with Ruth in various ways, both either co-mentoring, which I really appreciate that from the last session with Margaret and Karen, is that it is never a one-way street. It's a reciprocal relation, and I can feel that in the way your project is discussed. And they're going to be talking about dances with resistance, or whatever you want to talk about. That's what I think you're going to talk about. And then we move on to Will Weigler and Krystal Cook, and they're going to talk about a project that they're deeply a part of called From the Heart, but they're going to do their own sort of introductions. And then the next one is back to here. It's about a mural project destined at some point for somewhere here. But I'm going to give you a little background on it, that it was a project commissioned by the Nature House in Stanley Park, an ecological society housed in this park that, if you were with us yesterday morning, we were reminded that the park is, the name of the park and the places of the park have been re-inscribed in the colonial era. And the park, the Stanley Park Ecology Society was working with an artist that was proposed to involve other artists, young Aboriginal artists, and community participants to come up with an image that the society thought could represent well the Indigenous, non-Indigenous life of the park, and possibly reference the Indigenous, non-Indigenous histories of the park. The artist, Melanie Schumack, was part of that proposal, and in her statement spoke about the process of nurturing a sense of community and connections. What we'll hear from these artists and from Jill Weaving are some of the challenges that actually happen when one engages in community arts and in community processes. So I think that's enough to start you off. Thank you again. Welcome.
My name is Sid Bob. Yeah, okay. I'll try and be quiet because I have a hard time moderating my volume. So my name is Sid Bob. My mother is Lee Miracle from Tsleil-Waututh. My dad is Ray Bob from Seabird Island on the Fraser River, not too far from Agassiz, so Stalo. And I grew up out here, but I moved out to Ontario as a young lad, and so I've been out there for a number of years. I've had the good fortune of being a part of starting up a company with Penny Couchie and a number of other people from Nipissing First Nation. And Aanmitaagzi is Anishinaabe Moin for he or she speaks. And so we were looking at, with this group of artists, Carol Guppy and Perry McLeod and myself and Penny, where did all of our interests lie? And that kind of name really speaks to who we are and what we aim to do together with this particular work. We wanted to just kind of quickly also, so just a bit of context behind you. We were out in Ottawa invited by Article 11, Andy Morrow and Tara Bagan to be a part of their declaration. And it was really fitting because it seems like a little bit of a summation of our project Dances of Resistance. And so what we actually wanted to show is that it was a reinvigoration of our relationship to art and art making in our communities. And so some of the images were a backdrop to our performance in Ottawa, where we spent a few days with the community there, investigating what declarations meant to us. So we have our cosmology, our origin stories are rich with declarations. We have our treaties, both pre-contact and post-contact. And then, of course, we have, in kind of more recent terms, we have all kinds of declarations from the, some of the American Indian movement or the kind of Red Power movement in the 70s. And then, of course, more recently with a number of other declarations from different protests over the years, kind of more recently Idle No More and a number of others. And so with the community out in Ottawa, we investigated declarations and did a kind of a 60s style happening or 70s style happening out there. And so it was a really good chance to look at some of the stuff that we investigated over the last 3 or 4 years with Dances of Resistance. And it seemed like almost like a a summation of that project and some of our work within a half-hour performance. So, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hello. Bojo Nangquin Indigenous Monk Dodam Nipissing Nintonji. My name is Penny Couchie, and my father is from Nipissing First Nation. He's Ojibwe, Anishinaabe. And my mother is Algonquin. She's from Temagami First Nation, and they live on Bear Island right now. And we make our home in Nipissing First Nation. And did you want to introduce yourself as well right now, and then we'll go forward? Yeah.
It's well rehearsed.
Yeah.
Oh, I could always go.
Surround.
I'll have this one. Okay, well, I'm Ruth Howard, and I'm first generation on this land, on Turtle Island. I was born in England, and I come from Northern English and European Jewish descent. And yeah, I work in Toronto and now around the country doing community art, doing art collaborations with people and places and stories, and sharing and learning how to do that better and more deeply. And I'm grateful to be here on unceded Coast Salish territory as a guest.
No, it's not.
It's a trick.
Bottom. Oh, up. There it is. Okay. All right. So yeah, I guess thank you very much to Vancouver Moving Theatre for all your work in helping to coordinate this, and of course the vast team of partners that you have. And of course, thank you to Jumblies Theatre and their kind of vast army for kind of helping to create a network for these wonderful things to happen. So in terms of, I guess, reconciliation, the project, and this is a good time to switch over to the photos. So we initially moved home to Penny's home territory of Nipissing First Nation about 8 years ago. That's when, shortly after Osk was born. And we wanted to, we spent a number of years working in Toronto as artists, but we wanted to move to one of our home communities, and of course, Penny won hands down. It was no competition to try and pull her out here. But we wanted to work in our home community with our stories, with our people on our territory. But that doesn't exclude urban environments for our company. I don't think there's any contradiction for us to be in a city or out, I guess, more on a reservation as their relocation acts and all that kind of stuff. But definitely, we're very fortunate and appreciative of being out on the lake with more access to land. Definitely, that's not lost on our company. But we wanted to go there, and we were inspired in large part by a wonderful community arts production called A Bridge of One Hair. And that's when we first encountered Ruth Howard, the force that she is. And a couple of things that relate to Dances of Resistance is that that production in particular centered heavily around this woman, Hawa Jabril, who went through the Somali independence movement. But then after the movement, after they were successful, a lot of the women were left to the wayside. And so to me, I really related to that as a First Nations man because I think in this kind of, this colonial times that we're living, that's been one of the, to varying degrees, one of the symptoms or fallouts in many of our communities. I know out here in Vancouver, people are probably aware of the violence that Aboriginal women experience, and so I grew up seeing directly and indirectly some of those things in my life. So to see a play centered around Hawa Jabril, who was in her 80s, it was just amazing because the Somali community in the Etobicoke area they all came out en masse to be a part of the production. It was just so inspirational. And so we went up to Nipissing First Nation and thought, oh, we got to do something like that. It's so powerful and amazing. And then after a couple of years, we're like, whoa, you need an army to like Ruth had, to do that. And so we spent a number of years looking for people who would be a part of our venture. And so Carol Guppy, Sherry Guppy, Perry McLeod. And then as we moved towards the actual full production, the army grew to include Jumblies Theatre and Anshire and Thinking Rock and a number of other Vancouver Moving Theatre. Savannah came out. It was just really amazing the amount of support that a production like that needed. But when we actually started this, I think in response to colonialism, there's a woman named Jane Middleton Moz, and we went to as kind of like considering ourselves like frontline workers. We went to a healing workshop with her up in Bear Island, much to the thanks of June Twain. And when we were going through this workshop, she was talking about how large-scale trauma can fracture a people, and this is not new information, but it really made us think a lot more about the community that we're in and that kind of fracture. And so a large part of this project was about, and I think that's what was so wonderful about Ruth's open door policy, as challenging it as it is, really provides a forum to that inclusivity is at the heart. And so it really shatters those barriers that can happen after large-scale trauma. And whether that's residential school or the relocation acts that formed reservations or any other large-scale trauma. And so in large part for me, that's what this project Dances of Resistance was about, is about taking art to as many places as we could. Knowing that art was ripped out of our communities through the prohibition and various acts over the last 100 or 200 years, the banning of the potlatch ceremonies out here and the kind of restriction of the powwows across the country. And at the heart of that, I guess for myself as a company member, and I think I speak for a lot of our company members, is that art for us is many things. And in fact, in Nipissing, Dan Commanda, one of the wonderful people from the community, said that in the Anishinaabe Moen, there's no word for art. It's just what we do. And so we spent a number of years exploring like what those tentacles of what we might call art. And so this was a chance for us to eat, harvest, celebrate, dance, and of course grapple with colonialism. And one of the things that I love about Ruth is that in relationship to reconciliation, she's helped foster our company and our capacity, and she's made a meaningful contribution towards helping us get into a chair so we could be a part of this large dialogue.
So like Sid said, we spent, we say 3 years, but it was more like 4 or 5, could be 7. Who knows? And within that time, we built our studio, Big Medicine Studio, and that's named for the Nipissings being known as Big Medicine people. It's a both Sid and I come from very from families of resistors, and we celebrate that. And Kalumpa, his sister, had come out to work with us, and we're deeply grateful for that, as well as Jumblies and Savannah, and there was a lot of really amazing people that pulled together to be a part, and Osk was in it as well. and over 4 years, we made as much art and lived as artfully as we do and can.
Do you want to show a little bit of the video, or did you want to close with some words?
Yeah, or we got our 5? We got our 2. Okay. Yikes. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Ruth, and then
Holding the video.
I think we'll have to.
How long is the video?
It's a 5-minute video.
Yeah, so we'll go to the words with you.
Let's go to the words.
Finish your words.
Oh, I'm done my words.
Well, I don't think I have 2 minutes of words, but I just want to say that, to go back to how we met, I was looking for guidance in our work in Toronto for how to deliver more effectively on what we said we were doing as a company, which was representing the people, places, and stories held in the land where we lived, and not knowing how to, in the context of community arts, be able to do that adequately in relation to First Nations history, and was also looking for a really great choreographer who would jump into a big project and work with work with non-dancers and people of different skill levels, and that led me to Penny, and with good fortune, it led me to both those things. So all these years later, really, my relationship with Penny and Sid and Aanmitaagzi, it's really changed my life and the life of my company for immensely the better and more delightful. And there's a lot more to say, but I'm just really proud to be sitting with them here in Vancouver and while they present their beautiful work. And so thank you, miigwech.
And if you want to see the video, there's, I don't know, another opportunity somewhere. Yeah, it could be online.
Well, maybe if we don't use all our question time,
There you go.
at the end. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you very much.
My name is Will Weigler. I am privileged to have lived for the last 10 years on Lekwungen territory in Victoria. I became a citizen within this last year after being here for this time. My father's side, I grew up in Portland, Oregon. My father's side came to New York from Eastern Europe. On my mother's side, my mother's father was born in Strathcona in 1903, and on that side it goes back to 7 generations of people who've lived in Manitoba and Yukon and New Brunswick and Ontario. I am very glad to be here. We heard a song earlier, and it brought to mind, Renai sang a song about to mind a poem, a little piece of a poem by Rilke that goes, "If the angel deigns to come, it will be because you have convinced her not by tears, but by your humble resolve to be always beginning, to be a beginner." And that's how I characterize myself. Resolutely a beginner. I also feel passionate about things and work that I've been doing as a director and a theater producer and a playwright for many years. To kind of characterize where I come from, I want to go to another quote. Philip Pullman, the novelist, credits his teacher for teaching him that responsibility and delight can coexist. Now that may seem obvious to many people in the room, but it's kind of a revelation for me. Responsibility and delight can coexist, and that's what a lot of my work is about. And so 3 years ago, when I went to a book launch for a book called Unsettling the Settler Within, Indian Residential Schools, Reconciliation and Truth-Telling in Canada by Paulette Regan, I was really moved by what she wrote about the responsibility of non-Native Canadians to step up and take responsibility for building right relationships, to take it off the shoulders of First Nations people to be leading that way, but to really join in partnership and to do our own work. I recognized that it was very much like the work that I do to stop violence and oppression of women. It is a lot of work that men need to do and that I need to talk to my brothers about. So I thought, how could I bring my gift and what I do as a theater director to that work? How can I bring that? And Krystal Cook, who you'll hear from in just a moment, came into this project later, but at the beginning, I want to tell you how it began. Conceived of as, of all things, a labyrinth, a huge labyrinth. I imagine an immersive theater labyrinth that we would populate with performance pieces by non-Native Canadians, multicultural, intergenerational, all of them invited to find stories that had moved them to understand the legacy of colonialism and the lived history of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people that had opened their eyes, and that I could work with them to help them create a theater performance or a song or a visual installation. We would populate the labyrinth with that. And I saw it as sort of what we could bring. And then one afternoon in early planning stages, I went on a long walk with Savannah. And she was very enthusiastic and very supportive, but she advised me in no uncertain terms to find a First Nations partner, someone that that I could turn to, that I could collaborate with, and that I would benefit from that person's wisdom and insights. I knew right away who I wanted to ask, because I knew Krystal a little bit and I knew her work. But I didn't necessarily feel like I could ask her, because she's very busy professionally and raising her family. So I just figured I had to find somebody else. And then I was talking to a mutual friend of ours who sort of smiled, and she said, "Will, don't you think you should ask her if she has enough time, rather than just assuming that she doesn't?" And so we invited Krystal for coffee. We started talking, and after looking over the schedule, she told me that she would make time for it. That's when the collaboration began. And it evolved from there into the project, which ultimately led to the show, which was an enormous success, 120 performances, a cast of 100 people, and sold out the entire show. And now I've written this book with voices of all the people about how to do it. But I want to turn it now over to Krystal and have her tell you about her experience.
Great job. Well, 6 words or less. Excellent. He did it. Gela Kasla, Nugwa Amgra Akstalas, Gyayu Len Namgis, Lach Tsachis, Lach Mamalela Kla, Lach Denachtach, Lach Kromax. I'm really honored to be here today. Thank you, Savannah, for the invite to come and share our story, and for all of you being here to witness a little snippet of the adventure that Will and I shared together. And the book launch just happened last Thursday, actually, in Victoria, which in our language of Kwakwala we call Ts'amas. Can everybody say that? Ts'amas. And that means the city of many churches, which is so cool. Little worldview of our Kwakwala language. So when Will had approached me about coming to be involved in this project, it was the very first time that I had ever heard of non-indigenous people, settlers, wanting to come together to volunteer their time to come together a couple of times a week with theater as the vehicle to explore indigenous issues in this country, which, I mean, probably isn't something you think is going to be extremely fun. Which is why it perked my interest. And following with what Sid said, Jane Middleton Moss's energy must be in the air, because I was just at a workshop with my Aboriginal education team just under a month ago. So continuing in that vein of work, it was the first time that I'd ever heard also settlers wanting to come together and claim a space, to take responsibility and ownership. And I wanted to support that, because I strongly believe that we don't need to come together all the time together to heal and sort out all that stuff. There will be spaces that we will work together, but there are times when we both need sacred space to heal, to recover, to decolonize. So that was exciting to me. It was rare, it was cutting edge, and I agreed to take the journey, even though it was very unknown at that time and we were going to be jumping off a cliff and we didn't have a blueprint, but we did have some strong guiding principles of how we were going to work, and that is what took us through and allowed us to be able to execute the vision quite peacefully. But again, it was with strong adherence and discipline to the principles that we agreed to work together with.
One of the principles that we really stuck with, and Krystal was so gentle and yet firm in her insistence that we not look into stories about what other people did or other people do. It was always grounded in personal understanding, our own lived histories. And and really our own learning. I wrote letters to publishers across Canada and told them about this project and said, would you kindly send us free copies of your books by Indigenous authors and by non-Indigenous authors like Saul, John Russell Saul, who write about decolonization. Please send us free copies so we could learn. Because our thought was, rather than bring in native teachers to say, teach us, a lot of teaching's already been done if we were ready to prepare to look for it. Publishers really stepped up. We got boxes of books, and so we read through them, we looked for those stories that moved us, and then really, and that for me was the key, made the theater pieces not about acting out those stories, but about performances based on how those stories affected us. And for me, the difference is between kind of making a museum piece of trauma in the past, especially trauma about stories that aren't ours to tell, and instead making stories that are very much now present in the 21st century about how we are moved. And in that way, we invite the audience not to really look at this, again, museum piece, but to say, we as your peers are moved by this, and we invite you to be witness to our experience of epiphany and understanding. And that's it. And that, I think, was one of the strengths of what we were able to offer. The other piece I mentioned about the Philip Pullman, responsibility and delight can coexist. The marvelous thing about the Labyrinth is that it was infused with beauty, and all the pieces we created were infused with beauty. And there's something about taking, again, a story of trauma and making it beautiful that's a little sort of distressing, if you think about it. But finding beauty in the way in which we come to a deeper understanding really can contain that beauty. And it allowed people to access it, I think, in a really positive, forward, generative way. So those are the two things that I think were really helpful in the challenge of how do you engage theater with the question of facing the shadow of colonialism. Those are two things that we did. Anything else you want?
No, I think that's another vein that Will and I agree on is in relation to beauty. So sometimes I describe Indigenous reality as, you know, having two Ferris wheels of reality going on, because the trauma, the tragedies, they're still happening today, you know, in many of our communities, whether it's the suicide, the addiction, the abuse, it's still happening. So we didn't want things to be viewed as everything is still in the past. It's very real and it's happening today, and part of my role was really to support people to pick up their creative tools and support them to empower themselves to speak about their feelings and their thoughts and their views about that and about their own ancestry, and where they've come from. What happened around their dinner table? You know, how have people come out of university and not known about residential schools? How have people grown up to be grandmothers and never had an Indigenous friend? You know, so to go in and continue to turn inward. So that part of my role with the push and pull of the creative tension between Will and I was a very good creative tension there of push and pull. Was very much about supporting the cast, who was very brave from day one in trusting us and really, really stayed with the process. We were coming together a couple of times a week, once with Will, once with myself, to explore Indigenous issues. And the impulse for me, which was interesting, was around great restraint, because it wasn't my job to educate everybody, to be the expert, to do all the cultural awareness. And I supported Will and allowed him to take responsibility for doing that. And it wasn't about bringing in a bunch of Indigenous people, because I could have opened my Rolodex and invited a whole bunch of people in to touch and move people very deeply. So it was very interesting that, but it wasn't hard or painful to do that, but I was just aware that part of my role for that wasn't to rescue or to do it. It was to be there as witness, to the process, and to support people to continue to turn inward, to honor their own rich stories inside their body memory, and the rich history that they have brought to Canada. Yeah.
One of the words that came up the other day when we were thinking about this session was Krystal's role was a bit of like a spotter, you know? The cast was taking those leaps, and they could do that knowing that she was there if they started to go off the edge to say, let's edge you back on here. And this is another piece of information that will help you understand, so we could take those leaps and make those runs. Another really valuable thing for us was having a rapporteur. I didn't know that term before rapporteur. I didn't know that term before I came to Canada. Learned that actually from French means to bring back. And for what it's worth, I am the official rapporteur for this symposium. And so I'm tasked to write down what we're having here going on. If you ever feel like there's something important you want to say about what happened here, find me. We had a rapporteur, Rob Wypond, who's an investigative journalist, a really remarkable guy. And I thought we were bringing him to make a record of what happened. What actually happened was that in addition to the group we did in a circle, reflecting together at the end of the sessions, people got a chance, he interviewed people, and it gave them an opportunity to have someone who was completely present, listening, asking them, interesting prompts, and they came forward and had basically another chance to reflect with someone who was very present with them. And I think it really helped us grow each individual, each in our own way, reflecting on our experience, having someone who was there. So we got the report, yes, but also we got him to really help us go deep. Anything else you'd like to finish with? We're just wrapping up.
I think when I think about the process and, as I step away from it, more time marinates with what happened here was some of the strategies that we used around, because with a subject like this, as you can imagine, it'd be very easy to get caught up into political debate, and you would be stuck there and not being able to move anywhere. So we spent a lot of time behind doors deliberating and negotiating and to create a safe place for people to be able to speak their truth, whatever that was going to be. So it's not about being politically correct. It's not about getting on a soapbox. And we didn't want people to get trapped in the political debate. We wanted people to be able to share their truth in a safe place so that we could possibly, some of those pieces would be moved forward in the theatrical forum. And more than anything, we wanted to create a safe place that we didn't have to agree. Yeah. Because the variety of participants were all over the map, emotionally, spiritually, politically, mentally. So everybody didn't have to agree. And to honor all the different places. Some people had really a lot of Indigenous knowledge already and experience. Some people didn't, and it's all in between. So to be able to house and contain that was our job.
And with 17 rooms in the labyrinth, they could have contradiction within them. It didn't all have to work with one narrative and one story arc. So that's our time. Let's turn it over to the next and move along. And more time in questions.
Chakmaha, Siamensiaya, Sanakula Queensna, Skomish Ochamea, Sahan Ochamea, Hamaltrasan Ochamea. My name is Sanakula Weiss. I'm from the Squamish Nation. Thank you all for being here today. I'm very honored to be on this panel. Today we'll be talking about the Granddaughters mural. So as Jill was talking earlier before about our introduction, Melanie was part of a callback. So she applied to the Stanley Park Ecology Society to be doing these 5 panels that would be featured on the Ecology House in Stanley Park near the Lost Lagoon. The main theme of the mural was focused on nature, as it is the Nature House, and looking about the different ecology systems that exist within Stanley Park. And something that came up through the process of the going through the mural process was we decided through, there's 4 or 5 of us who were all on, we made the all ideas and all the themes and what we thought was important to be seen on this panel. of the murals, and we decided that it was important to interview 3 elders from the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, as that is, it's a very cultural location. It's shared territory by the 3 nations. So we thought if we're interviewing the elders, they could bring history that's been silenced and have that brought to the table of the stories of picking berries and picking traditional medicines. And these are things that were very important to us, of sharing the land. And there's not one name in the Squamish or Tsleil-Waututh or Musqueam for Stanley Park. There's many villages that make up the park, and they were all shared between the different nations, and it was somewhat of a gathering site, you could call it, because it was kind of central between all of the nations. So something that I felt was important going through this process was having these silenced voices of the Squamish Nation elders, having them being able to speak this history, because if even just searching about it online or going into, for me in high school and elementary school, I never learned anything about my own culture through my education. I learned it all from my family, from the educational, the elders, more cultural events that I was attending growing up. And this is just something that we looked at, like the different village sites. There's many people who lived in Stanley Park who were from the 3 nations, and they were forcefully removed. And these stories are just not shared at all. And they might have not been exactly present in the murals, but just showing, like on this slide, it has the dandelion root. And my mother is Toistanat Seaswice. She does ethnobotany, and she's been studying about herbal traditional plants and medicines for over 30 years. So growing up, I've learned a lot about different medicines, and it was important for me for this project to look at all the different kind of indigenous plants that are in Stanley Park, because many, like even grass, I consider a invasive species plant-wise. There's a lot of different plants that we're not taught about because they are considered weeds, but even dandelion root has been known for different parts of curing cancer or beating cancer cells, and there's just a lot of different traditional knowledge that's not being taught or not being recognized. So just looking at the plants, and that was very important for us. Another story that I found very moving was through Audrey Rivers. She was talking to us about a story for the, many people know about the big windstorm that hit in Stanley Park, and many people saw that as a very large tragedy, and it was a very damaging to the ecosystem. But from one First Nations point of view, that it was actually a very important event for our nation, for our culture, because probably over 100 years ago, there was 2 bodies that were dug up by the anthropologists when they were kind of getting the grounds ready and everything at Stanley Park, when it was not named Stanley Park yet. And these 2 bodies were they were dug up and they were removed, and they had flat heads, and that was a practice in the Squamish and Coast Salish nations, where it's very sacred, it's very honored to be seen having, like, they would flatten their heads since birth. It was a practice that was it's not continued today, but it was known very long ago that was very special to us. And these bodies were removed, and they were held in museums for over 100 years. And at that time, when the bodies were brought back, they were buried in a sacred location outside of Stanley Park. But they were returned to the Squamish people and the Coast Salish people, and that was exactly at the same time when this big storm hit. So that's to us, it wasn't a tragedy. It's known to the many Coast Salish people that the winds will bring back when the bodies are returned. It's very, very ceremonial, and it's combining the earth, and it's like very connected with our people. So we found this was something that many people would not recognize, as maybe this is seen as a tragedy, but I'm sure many artists know, for like who are carvers, like you had a great opportunity to find some great trees that were easily more accessible now. So it was very nice for looking at a different point of view. Maybe this is one person's tragedy. This is a very good opportunity for artists to bring, there was actually different commissions brought out after the storm, because all of the materials that were brought up, and we didn't want to waste them. So that was a good opportunity that I found. And more about the project itself as well. Like, we wanted to incorporate different stories from the elders. And not only the elders, we had community engagement. So there was the Stanley Park 125 birthday anniversary kind of event. So through that event, we had public engagement, and people were just coming to celebrate those events. They had the chance to put their drawings, either just coloring, painting by number, or they could enter their own kind of art to our murals. Through that, we had some opinions. People even wrote on there things that were kind of along the lines of anti-pipeline or just against oil, and that was seen as too political than natural, like against what our theme of nature was. So that came into some problems with the SPES, and there was they just felt there were some other things about maybe residential school, and there was different quotes about protecting the earth, and there was things that were not strictly nature, flowers, medicines, berries, that were a little bit too far than they were prepared to handle. So that's where we came into difficulties with having it being displayed on the Nature House. It's never been displayed there as originally intended. We've been through a very long process of waiting and deciding where is an appropriate location. We've had many discussions over, they feel they're not prepared to handle, say, like if people have questions of the mural, like why does it say this? Why does this image appear? They weren't necessarily prepared for some of how to answer and still be mindful of the cultural, kind of the protocols and the different kind of intergenerational trauma that occurs within First Nations people from residential school. And I was slightly offended when one of the women from SPES who was running it was saying, like, this is not a TRC funded thing, like trying to talk about the TRC. And it was at the same time when it happened, but it was just kind of like, just because there was some mention of intergenerational, the time of people living in Stanley Park to when colonization happened, having people being removed from the park, going through residential school. It was just the timing of having the TRC at the same time, and it was just saying, like, just because there's First Nations history in the park that's silenced, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to do with the TRC with that. So it was an interesting process for me watching everything play out with going through the process of saying, like, where can it be allowed to be seen, what's an appropriate venue, and how can we, the artists and the people who contributed to this panel, be really feel like comfortable with the art being displayed. So.
Hi, my name's Krystal Sparrow. I come from the Musqueam Nation, and my mother comes from Alberta and from Williams Lake. She's Shuswap and Cree. I'm a contemporary artist. I originally started out wood carving with my dad, who's also an artist. I originally started out with this project with Melanie, and I was very interested in that she wanted to include the local First Nations in sharing stories about Stanley Park. And it was really neat because my one of the elders invited was my Aunt Jerry Sparrow, actually my great Aunt Jerry Sparrow, who shared some history. And she mentioned that when she was a little girl, there was lots of berries and roots and things like that. And she would come to the park with her aunts and her grandmother, and they would pick roots and they would make baskets. And so for me, that was one of the values of this project, was actually learning that there was a history in Stanley Park. And then I felt very, very honored that I could participate in this project. My father also talked about the big windstorm that came, and it was quite interesting. He said that he was really happy that he was able to access some of the old cedars that had fallen, and he was able to carve some masks and panels. And it was quite interesting because he would go to different events and he would talk about Stanley Park and about how he got the wood there. So that was quite neat. I participated in the project in the early stages. We decided that we would include the elders as a way to represent history in Stanley Park, and to also include the medicines and the berries and things like that that Spes wanted. And I think from there grew some of the unfortunate history of how First Nations people were removed from Stanley Park. And one of the stories I heard was that my cousin Robert Cole, his grandmother, which is my grandmother, Matilda Cole, she lived in Stanley Park and she was removed. And the government had given them a check, or her and the other people there, and it was for $1. So that's what they received. And then they were called squatters if they tried to stay. So as much as there's negative stories, and I'm sure there's, it's quite unfortunate that there were people who had lived there who were buried, and unfortunately who were dug up. But I think in my generation and in this project, I hope that I could create some sort of solution to looking at positive ways to work with the local First Nations on protocol within Stanley Park. And I think that's definitely the first step, is to include the First Nations in actually taking claim back to Stanley Park, and then also to look at the history of the non-First Nations who lived in Stanley Park as well. And I'm sure they have history in that they have stories as well. And I would hope that for the future we could work together. And I also believe that this project is really a beginning of sharing history of Stanley Park, and I think it does need to be placed there. I do understand that it's not a space for Spes, because they can't really talk about the history. They don't really have that sort of background. But I do hope that this project can one day be in Stanley Park.
So hi. Yep. Well, less, probably. She knows, Marie and I work together. She knows I get overly verbose. So, hi, I'm Jill Weaving. And you've got a bit of a different view of this project. Melanie Schumack is not in town. So she's in Europe learning how social enterprises can work and how projects like this can be supported. So we respect that, and she wishes she could be here. Anyway, my relationship to the project, I'm the coordinator of arts, culture, and engagement for the Vancouver Park Board. And in Vancouver, our park board is actually a level of government. So we have elected park board commissioners who oversee our parks, and that's separate from our city council. So we're a bit unusual in that. I'm the coordinator of arts and culture, and in terms of this project, I oversee the funding program that Stanley Park Ecology Society applied to fund a project to replace their nature murals, which had been damaged by a flood. So often, I don't get to connect up with the projects that are funded again until I see a final report. Or the other case when I get involved in a project these days is when they come to a place where there's some kind of impasse and it's very hard to work out. And I work with colleagues who work with the projects, but then also call me in when they feel like we've got to a place where we need to really stand back and work towards some kind of resolution. So I came in, I basically was pulled in when we'd kind of hit this impasse where the murals had been created and the Stanley Park Ecology Society was saying, you know, we can't support these on the walls of the nature house. And that was a difficult place. And it was hard because in trying to express what the problem was, you know, things got tangled up because of course emotions are there, worries are there. And when I came in, actually what I started to see that there were many influences of colonialism that were affecting, you know, all of these good people who care about Stanley Park, all of the artists, all of the Stanley Park Ecology Society folks. And some of those, you know, I think this was a really timely issue for this particular panel for us to talk about. When the artists went to speak to elders in their communities, they heard the stories and they were felt compelled to tell those stories, to express their understanding of what they just heard. And so these aspects of the histories, I think, started to take a larger place in the mural than had originally been intended, than what the Stanley Park Ecology Society had been expecting. Another aspect was because these are complex issues, you know, the colonialism and what it is and how we're still in it. And, you know, it's a shadow, but we're slogging through it. It's not gone. They're complex issues. They're only now being more widely known, not well understood in the general community. And the Stanley Park Ecology Society felt that their volunteers, who know a lot about the problems of the salamanders and the insects and that are disappearing from the park, who know a lot about the invasive weeds that are choking Beaver Lake, that their volunteers couldn't actually provide the appropriate context to these murals with all the rich and disturbing information that they hold. They also really appreciated the elements of nature that they did know and felt that they could understand. There was also some concern that we heard from the community that a lot of these issues are so fresh that should some individuals who'd experienced some of these impacts personally come across them in the forest, and there being no place for support or sanctuary kind of to think, no quiet place to be and think and move through what might have been brought up for them. There wasn't any of that available at the Nature House. Also, because of colonialism, the three nations, the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh, have, because of the nature of the relationship that the government wanted, the colonial government wanted, they ended up being separated into groupings. And, you know, I've sat so many times and heard someone say, you know, my cousin with Jamara Jacobs, you know, we go and sit at Musqueam to talk about protocol, and, you know, she's cousins with the people from their protocol department that we're talking to. So and just now actually there was real seminal new accord struck between the three nations just last summer. So on top of that, because of colonialism, the Park Board is just now embarking on a new relationship with the three nations. And it's a government-to-government relationship. So it means that in order to try and move forward in a better way together about Stanley Park and what happens in Stanley Park, we're looking at creating a new intergovernmental relationship. But that means that when I'm talking, I want to talk about cultural issues, I'm talking to, you know, intergovernmental departments. So it's the impacts, when I looked at the theme, the impacts on what what was an art project? Aha, see, I'm going on too long. Basically, so where are my responsibilities in this project? I mean, I've got this responsibility. I'm a park board employee, and I'm supposed to be working with the intergovernmental group. So I need to figure out how I can ask for an intercultural council, a cultural, so that when I'm talking about art projects in Stanley Park, I'm not talking to someone who's involved potentially in other legal intergovernmental stuff. Responsibility to reconciliation, as it's been elucidated for us by Chief Robert Joseph. Namwayat, I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, but we are all one. What is that, you know, in our place where we are today? The responsibility to that. And a responsibility to art. And I'm going to refer to Karen, as she quoted Doreen Jensen's teaching, that art is a means of accessing the other side, the side that isn't available to us in our everyday lives. So those are the responsibilities that I need to bring to this project. To wrap up, I think we've recognized that we're on a journey together, and we don't know exactly where it's going. We know what we're looking for. But we've got a road ahead that isn't entirely clear. We know we're going to be talking to a lot more people. And we know that we're going to be back in September, and the murals are going to be in an exhibition, and we'll have another chapter or two of that journey to talk about at that point. So we want to invite you back if you're in town in September. Thank you.
I just want to acknowledge one of the other rapporteurs that's part of this, both this conference and I believe the train, Kwatsen Vedun. So thank you, Will, for your thoughts on rapporteur and the idea of not just documenting but really enriching the process. I just want to thank Kwatsen as well. And the idea of beginnings. Maybe that suits well with this train of thought as well, that it's beginnings. But I'm going to leave it to Lindsay to be the run-arounder. How's that for a term?
I'm running around. I'm going to pass it over here to this beautiful young lady.
Hello. I really enjoyed your panel, and I hope we get time to see your Dances of Resistance video, because I'm super partial to dance, as you can imagine. But I had a question. It really struck me that I think that everyone in Vancouver should be aware of the violent dispossession of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh of their homes and their land and their resources in Stanley Park. I think that it's a bit lazy if you're going to be unsettled, as you mentioned, unsettling the settler within. You need to know these stories. You won't enjoy the park the way that you would before if you really knew what happened to the people there, and the ceremonial houses that were burnt to the ground, and the graveyards that were the sacred burial sites that were used to pave the roads that people walk. Those were the first gravel on those roads, and how bulldozers went through the middle of homes while some of the people were sitting in those homes. So a great book is called Secrets of Stanley Park that talks to, where's Selena? If Selena's in here, the author's name. What's the author's name? Jean Barman. She does amazing work to bring those stories to life, and they're accounts from people who went through this, lived during this time of history. So I'm really struck and heartbroken, having written up some of this history in my dissertation, that these stories come from the communities, and this is what happens when you do community collaborations, that you think that you're going to tell one story. You think you're going to talk about the nature in Stanley Park and the food and the medicines, and then you go to communities and our priorities are different. oh, that's great. Well, this is a part of the story, but this is the story that people don't hear, and this is what people don't see when they go to Stanley Park. And to create those beautiful murals, and then for them not to go up because the Ecological Society doesn't want to take on the responsibility of teaching people about this history, I find that appalling. Appalling. I realize that this is the beginning, that the city of Vancouver is just started to acknowledge their occupation of unceded Coast Salish territories, and that the park board isn't governed by the city of Vancouver, that they're working on their own policies, but to give the Ecological Society more power than the communities. I'm going to follow up on this, and these are the reasons that I have these worked so damn hard to get these letters before and behind my name, because it's a platform to which people that are making these policies will listen. So my question, I guess, for those of you that are involved in this process, what was the community's response then to these murals not going up, and for really the Parks Board to be privileging the Ecological Society over the voices of the communities? I mean, the irony there, here are the stories that aren't told about Stanley Park. They did an amazing job of bringing them into the mural and also continuing to acknowledge what was the original tension, which is the nature, the bounty that's in the park. So how did the communities respond? And I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your name. I absolutely love your mom. Cease is an amazing.
Sanakula, or Sanak, is a shorter, easier to pronounce version.
Sanakula, is that from Sana?
Yeah.
Beautiful. So Sana, I mean, what was your community's response to this tragedy, and what are the efforts that you think, I mean, if you could change this dynamic, how would you hold the Parks Board and the Ecological Society accountable to your communities?
For the full community engagement, it's been hard to even have, we can't have a platform for community members to say, why is this not being shown? I know that there's been 3 elders that we're still in contact with them about the mural, and even this happened during a summer, so even throughout the fall afterwards, we were getting questions by the elders, how is the mural going? How is the process of the art, and how is everything kind of coming along? Because they felt very empowered sharing these stories with us, and it was very important for them, through colonialism, being so silenced, being so forced to be ashamed of their own culture, of their own heritage, for them to be having this platform to share, whether it be about nature, whether it be about the history of the park, for them to be able to talk about their own culture and their own land. They were very excited to see this mural happening, and I've talked with Jerry and I've talked with the different elders. They were asking how is it going? And it's been very heartbreaking for me to go back to them and say, we can't have an opening. We don't have a venue. There's no place for you to come and have an event and see this in the flesh, see this happen. Melanie was able to print small versions of us for all to take home, and I have it in my kitchen above my in my kitchen area. When I look at it every day and just think I'm the only person viewing this, it's only being seen in my own personal home and the other's artist's home, but it's really sad that I can't share this with a large venue and have the feedback. And I'm really glad that we are starting again on this process, but it's almost 2 or 3 years now that it's been so bureaucratic, oh, this person doesn't want it, or this person feels this. And we did have feedback of people feeling emotional responses. There is one, there's a building, I don't know if we don't have it up, but there's one image, and it does have a residential school. I know a lot of history of my own grandmother's account, because I've been really emotionally supportive for her she's had to do her trials with the TRC, and it's been really traumatizing for her to bring back all these memories, and seeing all our elders going through this traumatic process of having to prove how how horrible they were treated, and just like bringing all these horrible emotions and memories back. It's been really hard to see different elders going through so much trauma and addictions and not really having a place to speak openly. It's good to have the TRC happening, but it is definitely it's very traumatic for intergeneration watching our elders being very emotional. It's very depressing for them to think about these memories, but I think having something they can talk about what was before the colonialism, talking about the different villages in Stanley Park that existed before they were taken away, or having their families remembering what it was like to just walk throughout a nature in the Stanley Park, like honoring that this was our land and it's unceded territory not being honored today by whoever is in the park. Even we have been talking about having it near where the totem poles are, which are also not, like, I appreciate the Haduag culture and I love the art, but it's not culturally appropriate for Stanley Park because they're not Coast Salish art. There is the Yelton pole that is Coast Salish, the Squamish Nation artists who put that up, but I appreciate there's the Susan Point pieces and there is some presence, but I feel like having the ability to show this mural is bringing the Coast Salish presence back into the park, which is, it's really not honored. If even just tourists coming into the park, they will just say, oh, well, we saw this this totem pole and we saw this one thing, and now I know all about First Nations culture. But if you talk to someone who is Coast Salish, that's not our culture, that's not our history. It's a great history, but it's not something that we feel representative. We feel silenced, and that's what's really great about this project is bringing these silenced voices up because they need to be heard.
And then silenced again.
Yes.
And that's the saddest part. So I just
The
wanted to
endless
thank
cycle.
you. Thank you for your good work on this project. You know, I live here
Couchie.
locally, and if there's anything that I can do to help, I'm here for you guys in whatever capacity I can be. And just I hope that by the response of the audience today, know that you're not the only one that sees the injustices. This is hugely unjust. There's so many injustices here that are reproducing colonial violence and silencing this history, silencing your elders who contributed to this project. So we're here with you. I feel that, and I'm definitely here for you in whatever capacity I can. Thank you so much.
Hi, Chia, thank you for that.
There's a question over there, but while we're getting you the microphone, I wonder if there might be some discussion from some of the other members of the panel, because there's a couple of things that you've brought up in how you've built relationships. Will, you talk about the idea of the invitation and how maybe, and Ruth and Penny and Sid, in your relationship, is there something we can learn from projects that start in a way that can build, that maybe some wisdom that can move into something that's clearly still very emotional and fraught?
I'm not sharing this with the idea that it's not something that you know or that it's new, and that's, I guess, one of the things that that kind of relates to this is that when we were working on our project, we didn't go forward with the idea that, this is new, you know, and in hearing about Idle No More, kind of what we were trying to do is actually raise our awareness to all the work that's been done historically. And you go back, you know, when we're talking about transformation, goes back thousands of years for us. You know, we were never static. So we really tried to ground ourselves in movements so that we're aware of, you know, all this, the pounding the pavement that's been happening for hundreds of years and for before. And one of the things that I struggle with as an artist or as a human being is what's the kind of change that's necessary, and then how does my art relate to that? And you know, I think that there's an opportunity for artists to be at the forefront, but I also think that there's a trap to be conservative. And so I mean, it's really disturbing to hear that, and this is not necessarily new. And I guess what we tried to do with our project is what kind of change needs to happen. And so, you know, people were talking about John Ralston Saul and various people, and various calls for the kind of change that's needed. And that goes for the ecology as well as the colonialism. And that mural just kind of reminds me that they're so interconnected, that there's no separation. But we looked for, within our project, we looked for those opportunities where, where can the art exist? And this is a reminder that art can't always exist in certain places. But just to underline that, Ruth has been an individual who has identified best practices, which is that you can't just have one Native artist within a company as meaningful engagement. That you need Aboriginal people from the top down. And of course, for myself, kind of further to that is that our project was a sounding board for what is unjust about the way we relate to each other and the way that we relate to the environment. And so to me, it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of, so I would, if I was ever able to be a part of a support network for bringing light to the kind of injustice that's happened. And I'm very inspired by people like John Rosenthal or Ruth Howard who are saying, okay, it's time for meaningful change, and I think there's a world of people out here that would that could put a little bit of effort and boots to the pavement for what might be possible. And of course, I dream of returning lands and returning equal access to the bounty that is this country, and so on and so forth.
What do I want to say? Just a couple of things I picked up from our conversations. Actually, one of the things from planning this panel, if I can find it now, that Jill said that I really liked was referring to the everyday, this artwork has to happen inside, and how to be in that every day, and also, outside of it, or moving outside of it into changing things, just. And then what Mikhail just said about also, you think you're going to tell one story, and then you find something different, and that, because our theme here is the collaborate. We're looking at collaboration between First Nations and reconciliation between First Nations artists and communities and settler artists and communities, and we're also looking at community arts practice and how that can be part of it, and that flexibility to think you're finding one thing and then find something else and recognize that that's the story that's more important to be telling is part of, it's core to the work, and also kind of, important as well as sometimes fun and exciting and very frightening and alarming, but got to always change the story. And the other thing I wanted to say, just to clarify, especially if we watch the video of Dances of Resistance, that Dances of Resistance is Aanmitaagzi's production that Jumblies was delighted and privileged to support and be part of, and a lot of artists who've come with us were part of that production as well. And meanwhile, so I think someone also said that, Krystal said that about you don't always have to work together, and we come together a lot, but Aanmitaagzi does their own work at Nipissing First Nation, we do our work in Toronto, and we collaborate and connect. And I actually also want to acknowledge the people from Thinking Rock Community Arts who are here, which is another wonderful organization that we're privileged to learn from, provide support for as they develop. And it's, again, the coming together happens, and then the separate work happens. And so meanwhile in Toronto, we're working, and I'm very happy to have Angela Oft, who's sitting there as a colleague with Jumblies as our assistant artistic director for the year, and we're working on a project that she's heading up called Talking Treaties in collaboration with First Stories Toronto, which is looking at the Treaty 13, which is the treaty that governs the land that we're on, that our city is now standing on, and doing interviews around that and looking at that text, which is something that, I hadn't read the text of Treaty 13 although I've lived most of my life in Toronto, and we've recently created a piece, a piece that mixes traditional Aboriginal's voice with an opera singer singing the text of Treaty 13 and seeing how, how those weave together, and Ange can tell you more about that. It's a new thing we're working on. But just to say that we're doing our work at home, they're doing very beautiful and startling and brave work where they live, and we come together to support each other as we're doing it, and without having to, and still
Ruth,
do our own work. I'm done.
I'm going to get you to
Yep.
move on, just because we have one more
Move on.
question there, and
Yep.
I just wanted like a minute for you to talk about your notion of invitation, if you would,
Well,
Will.
it's certainly not my notion. Some teaching that was very important to me from the Maori people in New Zealand that really made an impression on me. Traditional Maori feast, the hui. There's a particular thing they do that when the visitor comes to the host's home or the place of the feast, the visitor brings a gift. In old days, it would be food. Now, possibly money. They don't hand it directly to the host to say, "Here's my gift to you." They lay it, the laying of the koa. They lay it on the threshold, and if the host chooses to pick it up, then once the host picks it up, this thing is then something that's shared equally among both. And to me, that was kind of revolutionary because to me, the idea of community arts, and certainly the invitation that I put out, as an artist, I am full of ideas and vision about what I want to do, but I don't say to you, "Come join my project." I say, "Here is this project," and I lay it here on the threshold. And if you choose to join it and pick it up, then it is ours in equal measure, and we both bring ourselves to it. And it's conceptual, but it's a way of thinking. It's a paradigm that informs how I think about the project. And I think it creates an impression, an invitation for someone else to also recognize they're not joining my work. We are now, even though I had this idea, it then becomes both of ours, as our project did.
Yeah. I'm David Diamond. I'm the artistic director of a theater company that some of you will have known for years as Headlines Theater, recently been renamed Theater for Living. I feel like I want to start off by echoing something that was said just really quickly. First of all, I want to acknowledge Jill. I don't envy the situation the thing with the mural puts you in. I kind of get the tightrope you're walking. But you know, it's one level about artistic censorship being done, we'll say out loud, with my tax dollars, because there's grants involved. And at a time when the city's talking about reconciliation, like it's really offensive. And so it feels like my question should be about that, but actually it's not, but is connected, I think. And the question is to this Krystal, because you talked about something that's really important to me, which is creating a space in which we can safely disagree. And that strikes me as really integral to not only everything that we're talking about here today, but artistic process. Because that space is where creativity is, it's where transformation is, it's where innovation is. That's the space where we push the boundaries, right? I'd like to know from anybody here, because I think it's what gets done, is insights you might have into how you do that.
We have about 3 or 4 minutes.
So in a sentence or two, please.
I'll do my best at 6 words or less, power words. Appreciate your comment, David, because we put a lot of time and energy and love and process into strategizing that. And in that same thing, it wasn't an assumption that anything goes in the context of racism or sexism or, you know, what I meant to clarify that further, of course, is that we wanted a space that if somebody grew up in a family of many generations of racism and they wanted to share that story, then that's what the space was for. Because we believe that if people can talk about that and be honest, that energy will help to propel us forward. To exactly where and what that's going to look like, I don't know. But to not acknowledge all those stories, all of them, uncomfortable, and, you know, and I think for us to not have a preconception of what people's stories were going to be, even within this project. I mean, one of the pieces that came out was about the mass grave from smallpox in Victoria, in Aanmitaagzi, you know, and not a lot of people may know about that, the huge mass grave there. You know, other people were courageous to want to question the culture of pedophilia within the churches and the residential school, like to question it from a place of like, what was the culture at that time? Not from a place of judgment, but a place of questioning and curiosity, as we can do in the theater. What would have allowed that as a culture to so widely be accepted? And I supported people to do that, you know, and I championed their bravery. You know, other people paid homage to personal connections that they had had with Indigenous people who wanted to pay homage to their life. So I think for us, it was about creating a container for that was going to house it, for people to feel safe to do that. And again, strategies were not getting caught in the political rant, being not being afraid to say, you can't say that in here because it's not politically correct. But the truth isn't always politically correct, if we're going to be honest about the history of this country and the rich ancestry that all of us carry. There's so much rich history. I know in the territories where we come from, there was many English and Scottish people that came into our territory. So we have many rich histories with those people in our territories as well. And it would probably be the same for many Indigenous people across this country. So that's also part of what we need to be talking about. So part of my role in the end of the day was to be able to hold that space for people, to be able to say those things and to be able to hold the space. It's not about the judgment, it wasn't about the political debate, and it's not about getting into the rant, to have the rant, but not to get snagged in the political debate, to get snagged on the soapbox, right? And surprisingly, it didn't happen a whole lot, but
The one thing that I would add, David, is that I certainly had been very informed by Liz Lerman's critical response process. And as complex as it is with its 4 different stages, one of the fundamental ideas is that when you're giving critiques, you're not saying, this is what I would do if that was my piece. You're saying, here's what I'm hearing from what I get, so that you can make a choice on what you want your piece to be. And that difference makes a huge difference, because we're not trying to say, I'm now the director of your piece. You have that, you're just using this as a sounding board to make your piece more effectively say what you want it to say.
Actually, it's probably a great time for us to stop this section, because we're actually moving into a space for discussion. So as we were told earlier, there are those pieces of paper that are just outside that is a space for you guys to write down what you want to talk about and bring up different suggestions or topics that you want to continue to talk about in our next talking and sharing circle section. So make sure the questions in the hands that we did see, please to bring those with you. And also, hopefully we want to see the video, and also maybe to hear more in the talking times about actually Will and Krystal, like your work, or to tell everyone what it was exactly that you guys are working on. So.
And the book is available.
And the book is there.
Actually, can I just say one word? Oh, sure. On this, I wanted to say that time is hard when things take time, but I think we've also heard that, things take time. I think this project did change, and I actually call it the dog's leg principle of community art. If you work in community and you have a picture of what you want to do, if it looks exactly like that when you finish the project, it's not a community project. So I think it has been hard, but I think one thing that we're coming to as well as we're starting to talk is we think we found a better place. The other thing that we've found is that we've opened up a new place for conversation with the Ecology Society so that we can help start making that information and understanding of what it is. I mean, we're not talking about anybody who's bad people. We're talking about people. Cece's mom has worked for the Ecology Society doing herb walks and medicinal teaching walks for a long time. You know, the park board sponsored a project, and again, Sinocola's mom, Cece, worked with an Italian artist to create a piece for Stanley Park that was about, you know, after the blowdown and what that park is.
About like the culturally modified tree. So with weaving, you would strip the bark off the trees for using it for weaving materials. So they worked together, both non-indigenous and indigenous. That was a good effect of the windstorm. Something that there's many opportunities for, again, indigenous and non-indigenous artists to work together and show what can happen with community engagement and with collaboration between both sides of the different people.
And the amazing thing is that piece is still there. I was just taking pictures of it, and it's just across from where the totems are. So, you know, it's a case of sometimes it takes time, but it takes effort and energy and willingness and understanding when something went wrong, that you don't stop, and that, you know, there's ways to move forward, and sometimes people need to cry or rage, but we're moving forward with it. And I think that story we heard, you know, the 7 years of people working together, the 20 years of people working together, we're embarking on continuing to work together on that. So I just wanted to say that important learnings through this. It takes time. Good people work together.
For now, if we could just, do you want to take 5 minutes and watch the video and then we'll all go? Okay, cool. Ever onward. Thanks, everyone.